All right, let's dive into something really interesting today. We're talking about feeding the world sustainably.
Yeah, it's a pretty big challenge, right? Especially with climate change adding even more pressure.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're looking at hydroponic fodder and how it can help farmers, especially with a changing climate.
It's not the first thing that comes to mind when you think about sustainable agriculture, right?
You got it. So we've got three sources lined up. One really digs into how climate change is affecting livestock.
Oh, I bet that's a sobering look at the situation.
Yeah, pretty much. And then we've got another one that compares hydroponics for like growing food for us versus using it for livestock.
Interesting. So, is it more efficient to grow lettuce or cow food with hydroponics?
That's the question. And to round it out, we have a proposal for this company in India called Shunya.
Shunya, what do they do?
They want to create this whole fodder as a service thing.
Hmm. Okay, I'm intrigued. So, we're starting with a problem, climate change, making livestock farming tougher, and we're going to end up looking at a potential solution.
Exactly. So let's get into those challenges first. Our research paints a pretty bleak picture, to be honest. Rising temperatures, rainfall all over the place, extreme weather events. Livestock farmers are getting hit from all sides.
And those impacts are pretty significant, right? I mean, we hear a lot about heat stress in animals.
Yeah, and it's not just that the animals are uncomfy. It directly affects how much money farmers can make. For dairy cows, like, hotter temps mean less milk.
Oh, I can see how that would be a problem. Less product to sell.
Exactly. And on top of that, the quality goes down to lower fat and protein
Mm.
content. Double whammy for the farmers.
Ouch. And it's not just cows, right? Pigs and chickens feel the heat too,
For sure. With pigs, it's all about growth rate. Heat stress slows them down, which means lighter carcasses.
which means less meat and probably lower quality too.
You got it. It throws a wrench in the whole operation. And chickens, they have a really hard time. They eat less when it's hot, slower growth, fewer eggs, the quality of the meat and eggs suffers, it's a mess. And here's the kicker.
Let me guess. While all this is happening, the demand for meat, milk, and eggs is going up.
You nailed it. It's like we're headed straight for a food security crisis. But it gets even more complicated.
How so?
Because it's not just a one-way street. Climate change makes it tougher to raise livestock, but livestock also contribute to climate change.
Right. I always forget how much livestock impacts emissions.
It's huge. 14.5% of all greenhouse gas emissions caused by us come from livestock. Methane, nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide.
Mostly from those cow burps, right?
Yeah, or, well, scientifically speaking, enteric fermentation. But you get the idea. So it's this vicious cycle. Climate change hurts livestock, and livestock farming makes climate change worse.
A real catch-22.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here?
That's where this hydroponics thing comes in. I'll admit, I used to think it was just for, like, fancy lettuce in those urban farms.
Yeah.
You know, with the LED lights and everything.
Right, right. Not exactly what you picture on a farm with cows and chickens.
Exactly. But growing fodder, the food for livestock, hydroponically, that's a whole other ball game.
And you think this could be a way to make livestock farming more sustainable?
That's what we're here to find out, especially in places like India, where they have huge problems with fodder scarcity.
Okay, so walk me through this.
Mm.
How is growing fodder hydroponically different from, say, growing lettuce hydroponically?
Good question. For starters, we can ditch the energy-sucking grow lights. Fodder crops are harvested young, like way before they need a ton of light. So just basic climate control does the trick.
Ah, so we're cutting down on energy costs right off the bat. That's huge.
And then there's the nutrient solution. For leafy greens, the kind people eat, it can get pretty complicated and pricey.
Makes sense. You need a good balance of nutrients for something you're going to eat.
Right, but fodder crops are way simpler. They do just fine on basic, cheap nutrients.
So, less energy, simpler nutrients. This is sounding good so far. But what about water?
You're thinking about how much water agriculture uses, right?
Yeah, it's a major concern, especially in the context of climate change.
And this is another place where hydroponic fodder really shines. Because it's a closed system, you use way less water than traditional farming.
Oh, that's a game changer, especially in drier parts of the world. Okay, so less energy, less water. But land is another big constraint for a lot of farmers. How much space do you need for this hydroponic fodder?
Think vertical. Instead of sprawling fields, picture those vertical farms, but for cows.
So you're stacking crops instead of spreading them out. Smart. That could be a real advantage in areas where land is limited. But growing the fodder is only one part of the equation, right? How do you get that hydroponic hay from, well, wherever it's grown to the cows?
Especially in a place like India where logistics can be really tough.
That's where Shunya's model gets really interesting. Instead of these huge farms miles away from the animals, they're thinking hyperlocal.
Hyperlocal, so like
Wow.
smaller farms closer to where the cows are.
Yeah, they have these things called growth and logistics centers, GLCs for short.
ELCs. Okay, so like little hydroponic hubs.
Exactly. And each one serves a bunch of villages within like a 7 to 10 kilometer radius.
So shorter distances for transport. That's got to be better for costs and emissions, right?
Absolutely. And the cows get fresher fodder. It's a win-win. But then the question is, how do you get farmers to actually use these GLCs?
Right, because just building them isn't enough. You got to convince the farmers it's worth it.
And their solution's pretty cool. They call it fodder as a service.
Fodder is a service. I kind of like that. Has a nice ring to it.
Right. So picture this. You're a farmer in India, and every morning, just like you might order groceries online, you get fresh, hydroponically grown fodder delivered right to your doorstep.
Wow, that's pretty convenient. I mean, I imagine farmers spend a lot of time and energy just getting fodder for their animals.
Totally.
Hmm.
And that's what Shunya is banking on, that convenience factor. Plus, they're using technology to streamline the whole thing.
Technology. So we're talking apps, sensors, the whole 9 yards.
You got it. They use IoT sensors to keep an eye on the growing conditions in the GLCs. Make sure those plants are happy. And get this, they're even using AI.
AI for growing fodder.
Yep. They use it to analyze all the data from the sensors and optimize the entire process.
So it's like having a digital brain, making sure the fodder is top-notch and delivered on time.
Exactly. And the best part is they didn't just throw tech at it and hope for the best. They actually did pilot programs first, to work out the kinks.
Always a good idea to test things out in the real world.
So where did they do these pilots? What did they learn?
They've got 2 operational GLCs right now, one in Uttar Pradesh and another in Haryana. 2 more are about to open, and they learned a ton from those first 2, especially when it comes to what farmers really want and need.
Okay, like what? Give me the highlights.
Well, surprise, surprise, farmers want a reliable source of good quality fodder. Makes sense, right? Who wouldn't want that?
Exactly. But here's the catch. They're also really price sensitive.
Yeah, that makes sense too. Farming has tight margins. Every penny counts.
Totally. So Shunya's been trying out different pricing models, like subscriptions to see what works best. To make it a no-brainer for farmers to switch to hydroponic fodder.
So it's about showing them that even if it costs a bit more upfront, the benefits, like healthier cows and more milk, make it worth it in the long run.
Exactly. And you know what else they found?
What's that?
Even in rural areas, farmers are pretty open to using tech to manage their farms, which is something Shunya was counting on.
It's like those meal delivery apps. Everyone got used to that convenience during the pandemic. Why not for something like fodder?
Right. Shunya realized that farmers were already using their phones for banking and information. So ordering fodder through an app just made sense.
It's a natural progression. But it's not all about the tech and the convenience. Shunya also needs people on the ground to make this whole thing work.
Right. Absolutely. And that's another really interesting part of their approach. They're not just setting up these GLCs themselves, they're turning local people into entrepreneurs.
Oh, so it's like a franchise model.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been working really well. People in these rural communities are excited to run their own businesses
Yeah,
and be a part of something that's making a real difference in their communities.
like a win-win-win.
Mm.
Good for the farmers, good for the entrepreneurs, and good for the planet.
Right. It shows that even with these huge global issues like climate change and food security,
Right.
we can find ways to make things better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it all starts with thinking differently about how we do things. So for our listeners out there, why should they care about all of this?
This isn't just about hydroponics or India even. It's about looking at these big, scary problems like climate change and figuring out how to adapt.
And not just adapt, but find ways to make things better than they were before.
Exactly. It's about resilience, innovation, and realizing that we actually have the power to change things.
It's kind of hopeful, right? Like, yeah, the challenges are huge, but so is human ingenuity.
Totally. And Shunya's story really highlights that they're not just talking about change, they're actually doing it. They're out there proving that a small company with a good idea can make a real difference.
It's proof that we don't have to wait for governments or big corporations to solve these problems. We can take action ourselves.
And that's a powerful message. It's about empowering people on the ground, giving them the tools and resources to build a better future.
Absolutely. So to bring this back to our listeners, Why should someone interested in sustainable agriculture or just, the future of the planet care about this story about hydroponic fodder in India?
Because it shows that there are solutions out there. Maybe they're not the obvious solutions. Maybe they're not the solutions we expect, but they're out there.
It's about thinking outside the box, connecting the dots in new ways, and makes you wonder what other unexpected solutions are out there just waiting to be discovered.
Right. Like, what if this whole hydroponic fodder thing is just the tip of the iceberg? What other industries or challenges could benefit from this kind of creative problem solving?
That's such a good question to end on. It's a call to action for all of us to look around and ask ourselves, what problems can we solve? What connections can we make? What's possible if we dare to think differently? And on that note, this has been another deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration of, well, whatever intriguing topic we unearth.